everyone. Good evening and welcome to the Harriet Beecher Stowe House online. On behalf of the Friends of Harriet Beecher Stowe House, I would like to respectfully acknowledge that the ground on which we stand are the traditional Miami and Shawnee lands. We extend our esteem and gratitude to the indigenous people who call this place home. We also would like to thank our sponsors for the After Uncle Tom's Cabin, Black Voices for Justice discussion series. And those sponsors are School Outfitters and Hindman Auction House. So we thank them for their support over this past year. And if you want to know more information about them, you can go to their websites. And then I usually at this point say, check out all our upcoming programs. But guess what? This is the last program of the year. So we will, never fear, we will start again in 2022. And I'm sure John will talk a little bit about his next series coming up at the end. But so just check out our website for more information about things. We will start putting the schedule of events for 2022. It's not quite 100% ready and on the website yet, but check back in a couple weeks and you'll be able to see that. I know I will see a few of you tomorrow night at the annual member meeting, which is also on Zoom at 7 o'clock. So that is all of my announcements and so forth. I will let John get started with the discussion.
Thanks, Chris. I should introduce my co-leader tonight, Janice Walker, who had, I don't have to introduce her to Dan, but or to Joanne, but Kara and Amy might not know who she is. She has played many roles at Xavier. She was started in the math department, was chair of the math department, moved up from there to be Dan's and my boss as the dean of the College of Arts and Sciences. And in more recent years, was the vice president for diversity and inclusion at Xavier. And then has moved on from there to be a special assistant to our new president at Xavier. So with that, you know who she is. And let's talk about timeline. We've got a timeline here that spans the 20th century. I'm partial to the 20th century because unless I live to an amazingly old age, most of my life will have been spent back there in the 20th century. So it starts with Langston Hughes in 1902 being born, and he's got a maternal grandmother whose first husband goes all the way back to John Brown's action before the Civil War, and he actually died fighting alongside John Brown. So again, it reminds us of how new a country we really are and how recent the Civil War is. So Hughes was born in 1902, spends much of his childhood in Kansas, moves to Cleveland. So he's got an Ohio connection, graduates from high school there, and eventually becomes identified with the Harlem Renaissance. That 1919 date there is given as the beginning of the Harlem Renaissance, a great flowering of the arts in Harlem in New York by the Black population there, and a recognition of the artistic vitality in the Black community. So he gets started a couple of years later and actually winds up living in Harlem, not for the first few years, but in his later life, that's where he lived. That was his base. The short story we're reading from him tonight, 1933, One Christmas Night, published in Opportunity, a journal of Negro life. That was published by the National Urban League. And this publication did a lot of promotion of the Harlem Renaissance too. So a 1933 story, you know, the depth of the Depression was on, and that's part of the deep setting of that story too. Interesting to note how many of these magazines, publications were put out by the Black press in the first half of the 20th century, particularly. He has a kind of ambivalent relationship with Uncle Tom's Cabin, He had a satiric one-act play by that name in 1938. He wrote a lot of stuff for the stage. But he edited in 1952 an illustrated edition of the book. So he was aware of its importance. Overlapping with his life, we have that of Toni Cade Bambara, who starts in 1939. She's born there, not called Bambara yet. She was Miltona Merkin Cade, born in Harlem, his adopted neighborhood, Hughes's adopted neighborhood. Like so many of the Black women writers we've looked at this whole year, she changed her name. Miltona became Toni, not too much of a stretch for that. But many years later, in 1970, she would take the last name Bambara. So it's not a married name, it's not a birth name, it's a name she chose as her last name after a West African ethnic group. She found the name written as part of a signature in a sketchbook among her great-grandmother's belongings. So it was an identification with her heritage. Just as Hughes is identified with the Harlem Renaissance, Toni Cade Bambara is identified with the Black Arts movement, starting in 1965 and lasting about 10 years. And as that's getting going, Hughes fades from the scene. He dies in 1967. Bambara is particularly important as for promoting Black women. Hughes wrote certainly sometimes about women, but he's always doing it from a guy's perspective. But although we have RC as the center of consciousness in the story we read tonight, but here is somebody who follows or agrees with Alice Walker on the notion of womanism, that Black women their experience is so different from that of white women that it needs to be looked at for its own sake. And but there is a connection with Hughes and also a connection with Toni Morrison, who was an editor who nurtured Toni Cade Bambara as she was getting started. The Toni in Bambara's name is not after Toni Morrison. It came before Toni Morrison was editing her work, but it's a nice convergence. Bambara edits in 1971 Tales and Stories for Black Folks and includes work by Langston Hughes. And her story, The Lesson, was first published the next year in 1972 in a collection called Gorilla My Love. The third writer we're looking at tonight, ZZ Packer, was born in 1973. So she's the one who covers the end of the 20th century and is still going strong in our own time here in the 21st century. She's born in Atlanta, Georgia, which provides the setting for the story that Brownies. Her original name was Zuena. ZZ is not a name she particularly chose. It's just a nickname that she picked up in childhood and stuck with, and that's the name she writes under. So if you associate Hughes and Bambara with Harlem, you should associate Bambara with Atlanta, Georgia, at least for this story. Sadly, she dies of colon cancer in 1995. And was published by Toni Morrison, in 1991. So the story Brownies that we're reading tonight by Packer just makes it into the 20th century, 1999. And but as I said, she's still definitely going strong. She was part of the 1619 Project in 2019, where she wrote about the New Orleans Massacre of 1866, something I hadn't known about until I read her account of that massacre in the 1619 Project. So she's now 46 and still writing. Bambara, and something that doesn't show up here is that Bambara and Packer both have had extensive affiliations with various universities, teaching creative writing courses, being writers in residence. Both of them have master's degrees. So they're more academically oriented, whereas Hughes' background with college, but his background is more experiential. Okay, I think that gives you a pretty good background historically. So let me turn it over to Janice for the first question.
Thank you, John.
Uh-oh, people have frozen on my screen. Is that true for everybody?
At how much, yeah. You know, I would have taken more English courses, Dan, rather than, you know, all the math and science. It was, and I told John also, I could see a lot of connections between actually how I do math and how you take a story and analyze it and look at all the clues and interpret things. So it's this been a real, you know, I haven't gotten to the first question, but I just want to say how much it's been eye-opening and enjoyable, particularly as a Black woman who grew up in the South and I can relate to each one of the stories. I can just tell you things. You know, I fit in the middle part, but I remember when I'm young, it felt more like the first story. And as I grew older, it felt like the last story, but I actually fit right in the middle. And each one of the stories, I thought, oh, I remember that, you know, just brought up memories. So anyway, we're going to begin with the One Christmas Night by Langston Hughes. And we're going to ask you about the main lessons you take away, particularly from the second last paragraph of the story, which I will read and quote, that wasn't no Santa Claus, R.C. explained. If it was, he wouldn't have treated you like that. That's a theater for white folks, I told you once, and he's just an old white man. So what lessons or takeaways do you have from that paragraph?
I thought when I was reading it, I wrote so confusing because I feel like it's already confusing to little kids when they see a Santa Claus somewhere and they're like, oh, that's Santa Claus. And then, you know, other people are like, well, no, it's not really Santa Claus. And so already like that confusion is happening. And then he's also so confused about the fact that he was treated that way. It really, like, when I was reading it, it broke my heart. Like, I just could see this little boy, and like learning that the stories that he's told, you know, like he's kind of losing part of his childhood already at a young age. The Santa Claus part of it, but also like the treatment of how he's going to live life, unfortunately.
Yeah. If I could, I particularly like these readings this time, and there was a connection between them of a lost innocence of children. All the children here in all three stories are very innocent in whatever at very stages of their life, but they lose that innocence in the story. They come to a realization in the story that is sad in every single one of the stories. Actually, this little kid, it's so sad. You know, he's so happy for Christmas, and his grandmother is our mother is trying so hard to provide it for him, and he gets caught up with doing it on his own and gets lost innocence. It's terrible. Yeah, but I saw a connection between all three stories of a lost innocence at various ages of you know, at that age, at about preteen and a teenage life, that was sad in all three of them.
You know, there were, you know, speaking of the childhood experience, in this story, there were two things that truly bothered me. One with the mother and one with the little boy. And when the little boy, as you said, the loss of innocence, when he went to this theater and goes to the front, and he was all excited and really wanted this candy cane and the animal cookies and things like that. And the Santa Claus reached down and got this rattle, a big loud rattle, and he knew, I mean, he had to know that that would scare a little kid, right? And to do that and laugh was just I thought was just inexcusable and just almost cruel to me, how he treated him, and couldn't have given him a candy cane or a box or anything, but scared him and had the little boy running out, and so it was amusing more so than anything. And I mean, that was really disturbing to me. And, and would he have done that to a little white boy who walked in? Well, a little white boy would have been perfectly, I mean, as soon as he walks in, I mean, it's clear that he, quote, didn't belong. So all the attention is on him. I mean, I just agree with you, Kara, about, that loss of innocence. I mean, that, you don't forget things like that, when that happens to you. And if I may, John, I want to say how RC's employee came home late, and knowing that she needed to, when was she going to do her shopping? So she takes her time, comes home late, spends more than she should for her children, as though, and then some excuse about, well, I didn't know you wanted to be paid at the end of the week. Well, when does she want to be paid, And so she's short, and $2 out of $7 might not seem a lot to her, but it's a lot to RC. And I mean, it was just, and how RC could not really speak her mind. And so she just had to absorb that. Was, to me, this sense of, I can do that because I'm the employer and you're the employee, and my children are spending for them is more important than spending for your children. And my time is more valuable than yours. I mean, there were just so many things in that one little piece of her coming home late and not giving RC the opportunity to leave and to shop. RC and her son had to walk 6 to 8 blocks in the snow while she's driving. I mean, it was tough to read that.
Yeah, I really thought the whole story, especially that beginning part, really did demonstrate the huge dichotomy between the white family versus this African-American woman and her child. The other things that really struck me that are, more of a time period thing than anything else is, here's this little 5-year-old boy just wandering around the streets by himself as a mother. I'm like, oh my goodness. So I was worried that he was going to get lost, and then that was going to be part of the thing, but that didn't end up being part of the thing. But the other question I had was, the stores were open till 10 o'clock on Christmas Eve, and I was like, wait a minute, when did that switch over? And part of that is because from my childhood, Christmas Eve was always the holiday for one side of my family. So we had to be at a relative's house by 2 or 3 in the afternoon for our holiday celebration with that part of the family. So you couldn't do any shopping on Christmas Eve. but that was part of my childhood and is still what we do today. So I don't even think about shopping on Christmas Eve. You got to be done, you know, before that. So I'm usually shopping on the 23rd. But at any point, so I was like, the store's still open? How many people are out on the streets this late? So I don't know what the answer, and I guess it was both whites and African Americans that were out. So I don't know when or how that changeover occurred, if it.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
Yeah, remember the 5 and 10 was packed. I mean, very crowded, and that was one of the reasons. In addition to, she didn't want to know what she was buying for his Christmas present, that she asked him to stand out. I thought about how she might have felt when she looked for him. That I had a similar incident where I was in a store and my daughter was next to me and I was asking somebody at the counter a question. And when I looked around, she was gone. And it was a huge department store. You have no idea how that feels. Well, I hope you don't have any idea how that feels. You try not to panic, but it is something just goes all, you drain to, it's a feeling that I don't wish on anybody. I found her, but she had gone up the escalator to another floor, to the toy department. I mean, this was a huge place, and you know, just a matter of that. So, I mean, I was just reliving some of her feelings. Amy, what do you want to say?
Well, first I want to say, just regarding that, I was the kid who ran off in the store from my parents. So I have a new perspective on that now that you said that. Thank you. Obviously, I'm not still 4, but, you know, yeah, what we put our parents through is difficult. So I was just kind of listening to everybody. And here's the challenge that I've got. I grew up in a family where we don't celebrate Christmas. And so we always knew, well, we were taught something different about Santa Claus. And we were actually taught to behave. So when you went to the Shillitoes, you know, you got in line and you did participate in the community event of going to see Santa, and you did not tell any other children in the line what your opinion was of Santa. So the whole loss of innocence is kind of a different perspective. Like, we had a neighborhood bully, and I can't tell you how much everyone wanted to tell him what some people consider Santa to be. So like, while I was watching Joe be decimated by Santa, I can't, like, I was trying to wrap my mind around that loss of innocence and hearing your mother say, well, that's not really Santa. Because I know that's not really Santa. Doesn't he know that's not really Santa? I mean, does that make sense? And like, also it made me think of this new commercial. It's an Etsy commercial, so I'm not like plugging Etsy, but it's an African-American family that goes to see Santa, and you can see the grandfather is so over it because he's not represented visually by the Santa. And then his family finds him I think it's a sock or something that has an African-American Santa on it, and his face just lights up. So I don't know, and I guess I'm asking more or less, but not trying to put anyone on the spot. I just don't know those experiences because I don't have them in my life. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
sure.
You know, one other thing I want to say, when, you know, it brought back memories when I was a child, and, you know, we were always told, you know, you have to be good, otherwise you're not gonna, you know, better watch out, you know, Santa's watching, all that. I remember, Dan, I never got anything on my list hardly. And I'm sure it was because...
That's because you were a bad girl.
You know, yeah, as a child, you know, you just write these things. And my parents, there were 6 of us, so they really couldn't afford. And so we would get fruit and nuts and stuff, and maybe you might get a couple things. And if I got a doll, of course, she was always a white doll, right? And it was, you know, I used to wonder, I said, what am I supposed to be doing better that I can't get? And I just really wanted this cowgirl outfit that I never could get. And, you know, and so so part of it, I mean, that has, you know, I'm not saying that this is all because I was an African-American kid, but certainly, you know, the families didn't, as a group, didn't have the resources to buy things, you know, pretty expensive things, and that the number was limited. And so it left me with a funny, I had to come up with my own, in my imagination, about what Santa was and why I was getting. It was like, you know, it had to be, oh, Santa think these things are better for me because I can't get the ones that I want. Does that make sense? And so you have to come up with something, because I didn't want to think, John, that I was a bad person or a terrible kid. So it was, oh, well, Santa knows what I really want, you know, or need, versus, even though I have this, I want this Annie Oakley cowgirl suit, you know. So anyway, final question. There was a lot of snow, and one of the videos I looked at, it was just snowing. Question is, do you think that there's any relevance to all the snow, you know, the white snow? Question for you all. Can I call on John to answer that one?
Well, I could suggest something that, I mean, obviously it's winter, it's Christmas time, so snow is, you know, kind of associated with white Christmas, but notice the word white in there. And there's a line in the story that says, there were too many people, all white people, moving like white shadows in the snow, a world of white people. I think the snow is a symbol in the story for the white dominance in the culture. It's one of the things that that R.C. has to contend with. And obviously little Joe is being introduced to that by Santa shaking that rattle in his face. We like to, I mean, I think for white people, you grow up with sort of a conventional notion of, well, white means purity or innocence or goodness or whatever. But that's been interrogated by a lot of American writers. Poe does it sometimes, and most notably in Moby Dick, Melville has Ishmael say, it's the whiteness of the whale most of all that appalls, because it can be anything. It's the ambiguity of the white. It could be, you know, yeah, maybe it's pure and innocent, but at the same time, it could smother you. It could be disastrous, and it's cold. So I think there's a commentary here on the racism in the story, that Joe and his mother are being oppressed by a white society. That's one of their problems. But of course, the social class is another issue. Obviously, the employer has a lot of money. And when she says, oh, I don't have enough money to give you your full paycheck, you know, I owe you $7, but you'll have to wait for the other $2. I don't know if I believe her on that. I think, you know, she may not, you know, she might. Empathy, and she just doesn't. Would be $7. And I think what the other dimension of the story that we haven't hit, that I think we could talk about a little bit, is the landlady who's watching Joe. The problem that that R.C. has in the delay caused by her employer ripples out to this other woman who is watching Joe, and it highlights, I think, that this is a single mom, R.C., who's trying to make it. She doesn't have backup at home. She can't call her husband and say, hey, you know, watch the kid, or I'll be a little late. None of those options exist.
Right.
So we piled up a number of obstacles she's got, and that kind of fits in with what's going to be a theme in all these stories, the intersectionality, to use a very common term these days in analysis. literary and sociological analysis, that somebody like Arcee faces an intersection of many forms of oppression.
Right.
I don't know, Janice, I don't know if you want to talk about
No, no,
intersectionality at all? Or?
no. I mean, that, of course, to some degree, I lived that, you know, and sometimes it can be pretty hard to try to navigate, you know, when the two worlds sort of conflict. And, you know, I mean, the two simple ones for me is, you know, racial and gender, right? And, you know, I am pulled with, you know, there's gender inequities and inequalities. And so I feel that, but I also feel racial ones, and sometimes they sort of clash. And I feel that I'm being, that I can't win on, and that I'm being asked to navigate something that I don't know how to do, you know, that. And so, I mean, that's the easiest one for me to talk about. And, but yeah, I can see a lot of that with, in each of the stories, right? And John, I'm happy that you brought up the landlady, because, you know, it just, I don't know, I just felt that Arcee had a very tough road, you know. I mean, I mean, the only person she had somewhat of control of was her son. You know, everything else people sort of dictated, and I could feel that she wanted to, that she didn't agree, or that she would have wanted to say something, and there was just no place for her to do it because of the potential consequences of, quote, being or stepping out of line. That I know very well. So, but anyway, we can move on to the next one, John, if you
Yeah,
like.
let's do that. So this is the Toni Cade Bambara story, The Lesson. And just a quick background point on that. Bambara remembered an older friend in Harlem, somebody Miss Moore might be based on. They called her Grandma Dorothy, though she wasn't a grandmother, and taught her things about the importance of Black culture, Afrocentrism, and the need for stories to be emancipatory, the need for stories to liberate Black readers. So she may be the inspiration for Miss Moore, or part of it. I'm not saying it's the same person or completely modeled after her, but I think there's a connection. So the question is, what do the interactions between the narrator Sylvia and her friend Sugar tell you about the lesson or lessons the two girls learn or don't learn? What do you think? What do they learn, if anything? What is the lesson? Kara?
Being a history teacher, I picked up on the part where Sugar talks about it not being much of a democracy. And I thought that was interesting. And I feel like that is more connected today. I didn't realize maybe as much of like the connection of inequality in a democracy. I guess, I mean, obviously it's always been there, like where people talk about the right to vote and things like that. But, you know, she's such a young person to be picking up on this. I was so confused throughout it. Like, how old is this kid? Because at first it was like, you know, you couldn't play hide and seek, you know, in the stairway. And so I'm like, okay, well, it must be little. But then she says something about fourth graders, and my son is in third grade. And so I'm like trying to picture my son. And then, you know, they're having this conversation about democracy. And I think Sugar, you know, is the one who is able to put it into words and able to like talk about what it is that Miss Moore is showing them. And I think the main character, I can't remember her name, she's like mentioned, starts with an I. Oh, okay. That she kind of just doesn't want to, she wants to avoid it. I think she sees it and I think she gets what's going on. But I think she wants to just avoid it. And maybe it's that idea of loss of innocence. Like she wants to stick with being a child and not have to really lose that innocence the way that Sugar very clearly is.
Well, Sugar's to the point about age, generally these kids are described as adolescents. So they might be upper grades, high school kid, freshmen in high school, something like that. The fourth graders are in the other story in Brownies. Those kids are identified as fourth graders. These girls are older because they can go off to the movies by themselves and do things you wouldn't let a fourth grader do.
And Carol, remember, I think one of them said, I think Sylvia said that Sugar stole some lipstick or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember doing that. I was probably sixth grade or something like that. It's about the time you think you're grown, that your parents can't tell you anything. So,
Which
so
is
I think
perfect,
you're a little bit older.
Which is the perfect age for what Dan was talking about before, this initiation into the world, learning, losing some of your innocence. So yeah, let's think about the end of the story again a little more. What do they do? How do they apply whatever lesson they have learned? Because Sugar certainly says all the right things to Miss Moore about we don't have a democracy and there's such inequity in the society, social class bias. But what does she do then?
Go ahead, Dan.
No, you go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, so Sylvia she's really, I think she understands, but she doesn't want to talk about it like Sugar does. But what she picked up on was, hey, I got this extra $4. Let's go buy some ice cream or whatever they were going to buy at the end. So, she wants to, anytime she can get ahead, she's, kind of looking for those opportunities to get ahead. She's maybe her take on it is, yeah, things are inequality is all around us. We're never going to be able to buy the $35 toy to play with, but if I get a little extra cash for nothing, I'm going to use that to my advantage.
Yeah, I caught the same thing, Christina, but I caught a lot of anger because she knows she's been found out, but Miss Moore's not saying anything about it, and she's going to take the $4. But when I was reading the story, I thought Miss Moore was a wonderful teacher. But as I came to the end of the story, I went, man, what is she trying to prove with these kids? She's made them all angry, and have they really learned anything? She didn't close it in a way that led them, in my opinion, she didn't close her lesson right. She left them with nothing but being pissed off and angry about the situation that she showed them that they're in, and then left them hanging. Because I thought she was a great teacher up until the very end, and I thought, well, what was her goal? What did she want these kids to learn? They learned something. Yeah, sadly, they learned something. But she just left them hanging then. In my opinion, that's what she was. And I thought, yeah, she's not such a great teacher if she's going to leave her kids hanging like that.
But I think that's the point of it. I think in all of these stories, there's this helplessness, there's that, they don't have any power, they don't have any agency to make a change. And I think, that I think is part of the story. RC can't do anything really about that white Santa Claus. They can't go into that movie theater. She can't do anything, like you said, about being late to get her kid or not getting the money from her landlady or from her boss. And then here, what are they going to do? First of all, they're kids, but I think the adults don't even know at that time, what to do to really make a difference. And I think that's what hits me the most when I'm reading stories like this. I read a book recently about women in the, like during the Great Depression who were like rural librarians on horseback. It was part of like the WPA. And just like these women who have no power, whose families are almost like, you are not going to ride a horse and deliver books out in the middle of nowhere like that. No. And they had to stand up against their family to do that. And in just some of these books, it's the same feeling of helplessness. And it's just like this overwhelming, like oppressive feeling that I just like can't imagine.
Amy, you have your hand up.
I do. And normally when I talk about short stories, I don't necessarily include the audience in that. You've got the author's point and the lesson that they're trying to make in the story. But I think with the story, the lesson, my takeaway is that we also as readers get a lesson from that, because we're exposed to a different, like, and I will totally overshare that I have been to FAO Schwartz and I know how outrageous like some of the products are. And, you know, I think as a child, well, at least in my experience, I didn't know what the dollar meant or how far it stretched or how much those things really mean. But these children in this story do. And as an adult reading this and seeing the prices and the cost and the discrepancy and inequity through their eyes, I'm coming away with perhaps more of a lesson than they were, if that makes sense. Because, you know, yeah, $300 and something for a child's microscope. How is a child supposed to afford that when they have $5 in their pocket? Maybe. And so I think that she's writing it for the reader as much as she is for the characters in this particular instance.
Excellent point. Is there another hand? Is somebody? Oh, okay.
Well, I'm just gonna throw out here that it really reminds me of that 80s song by Bruce Hornsby. That's just the way it is. Some things will never change. Which is, I mean, it's about economics as well, but, you know, economics and racial inequities. So.
I thought that Sylvia actually understood the disparities or inequities better than Sugar. And I think that's why she was so angry, so mad. That's why she was, almost, she was angry at Sugar for even responding. But I mean, all the little clues, she just acted like she was really mad. I mean, I know she talked about the teacher in a way, you know, that wasn't good, you know, nappy head, black as hell, you know, wear no makeup. And, I mean, she went on and on and on like that. But she was obviously, I felt she was obviously a bright person, young lady, and I think she got it. But once you get things, you have to deal with it, and I just don't think she wanted to deal with it. And so you're in denial. You know, it's like, you know, you present something to someone that they don't want to face, because or to be aware of it, because if they're aware of it, they have to deal with it. And so I'm just gonna, you know, I'm just not gonna recognize it. I'm not going to acknowledge what you want me to acknowledge. That's how I felt about Sugar. I mean, Sylvia.
Yeah, because by the very end, Sugar's the one who wants to go get ice cream. And she says, I'll race you to Hanscom's or whatever the ice cream place is, and then we'll go to the movies. And Sylvia says, no. I mean, she said, let her go. I'm going to go to the neighborhood in New York, the fancier neighborhood, and take a look at that. She says, I'll go the West End, okay, which is a quiet residential, kind of an elegant older neighborhood. She says, I'm going to go to the West End and then to Harlem River Drive. Come back to Harlem. So she's going to look at the wealthier white neighborhood and then come back to Harlem. I think she's trying to put this together,
Yeah.
and it's hitting her at a deeper level. Whereas sugar can give back the answer that the teacher wants. Yeah, look at the disparity. We don't have democracy. And that's true. It's a good lesson.
Mhm.
But the deeper lesson, is trying to really cope with it on an emotional level. And again, figure out how I'm going to deal with this for the rest of my life.
Yeah, I
So
think
that
it
may
was
be why,
disturbing.
that
I
may
think it
be
was
why,
disturbing.
yeah, why she's the narrator. Sylvia's telling the story, and she's
Mhm.
confused at the end because she's been hit with this huge contradiction that's shaking her to the bones, and it's really bothering her. A final point, I want to come back to what Dan said about he thinks the teacher fails to bring closure. It depends on your educational philosophy, I think. And Toni Cade Bambara has been said to be an admirer of Paulo Freire, the Brazilian educator. I don't know if any of you have heard of him. He was a very popular guy back in the several decades, from the 60s through the 80s and 90s, and Freire, Paulo Freire. And he stressed the emancipatory possibilities of education, and that the purpose was to get people to reflect. And there's an essay we used to teach in our rhetoric class about contrasting what he called the banking concept of education, where the teacher just puts facts into students like a bank, or problem posing, where the teacher poses a real problem that's out there in society and tries to let the students try to come up with their own solutions for it. And I think that's maybe the kind of teacher that she is. She's trying to teach that way and say, okay, here it is. You figure it out. This is a contradiction. Amy?
And it also feels, at least with
Amy,
that
go
very,
ahead.
oh, sorry, I was going to say with that very final sentence, like, ain't nobody going to beat me with, nobody's going to beat me with nothing. It feels motivational. Like Sylvia's got a different, longer term plan for succeeding in this very unfair world, whereas going for ice cream is a shorter term plan with the $4 that you've got right now. But her vision is starting to be longer distance, I think. At least that's the sense I get.
I mean, I agree with that. And that's why I thought she understood that she was getting the whole point. But she wasn't happy with that. She was reckoning, that she had to reckon with this, right? I mean, that's a hard lesson for a young person, you want to think everybody is good and people are fair and everybody has the same shot. And this lesson was, right up in their face, something that they couldn't help but see, unless, I don't want to see it. So I felt that last sentence was confirmation in my mind that she got it.
So we talked about intersectionality in the first story. Do you see it in this story as well? I think obviously there's racism in the story. These kids are even kind of ashamed to go into FAO.
It's classism.
White people of seeing it. So you get great. And even among the Black students, that one kid, Mercedes, what do you think of her? Remember her? She's the only one who has this tidy place to study, a nice neat desk. And she's always sort of uppity toward the other kids, I think.
Right.
So even among the Black kids, among the minorities, there's a social stratification.
Right.
And she's got advantages the other kids don't have.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, there were a number of comments about beating the hell out of her or hoping you do something so you could hit her or something like that. Yeah, I picked up on that too.
Because she just likes to not exactly lord it over them, but simply by exercising her privilege and talking about the privileges she has, it makes the other kids feel bad.
Right.
And they resent that. So there's a lot of feeling here, a lot of undercurrent in the story, I think. And the other thing is that all the adult characters are women. They're the ones, again, who seem to be taking the most. There are references to our parents, but you don't see any of the men doing anything. It's all Aunt Gretchen and these other women, and then Miss Moore. So, and what does Miss Moore's name mean? Moore, Othello, the Moor of Venice, but maybe more. That's another way to say it. She thinks there could be more going on for these people than there's more to see than what they've been seeing. Well,
She's not married, right?
anything else about, yeah, Kara, go ahead.
Well, and she's not married because she's Miss Moore. So like she was able to go to college and do all these things. And the only man really that they mention much is the taxi driver. And he's like, he almost takes off without letting all of them out. And so they're yelling at him. But I also thought it was interesting on page 2. I don't know if it's the same version as what you guys have, but they talk about putting lipstick on and then they call Flyboy a faggot. And so I thought, that's another,
Yeah.
Mhm.
I think.
Definitely an intersection of a whole other set of prejudices that come in. Yeah, that's good. A good point to notice.
Yeah. When I went to all black school and then a historically black college, and but as I was thinking about the names they call Miss Moore, we had our Miss Moore, and we did, and she was unmarried, highly educated, always was trying to teach us lessons and wanted us to behave and speak properly, all of the very much. The difference was, how Miss Moore is black as hell. This woman was the color of Dan and the rest of you, but she was black. I mean, she lived in a black community. And so, and again, so she was very different from us in that way. And so we attributed, how she looked and all these things. It was like, and we would just whisper things and talk about her, behind her back. And she was really trying to teach us, right? But so my point is that all these stories, I'm reminded of something similar to it. And it makes me see her in a different light now that I'm an adult versus, when I was a child, right? But it was the same thing. She wore nice clothes. I mean, the biggest difference is the color. Otherwise, how Miss Moore is described is the same way as Miss Vault was.
Was Miss Vault trying to pass, Janice? Was she trying?
No, she didn't. Because, once you were there was a line, and so if you identified with Black people, they assumed you were Black. So you couldn't. People were suspicious if you had Black friends. It meant maybe you're not pure. So, and then she couldn't. And so once you quote, or you identified one way, where you live, where you eat, where you work, where you go to church, all of that. And so, I mean, we didn't pay any attention to it after a point. I mean, I only thought about it in reading this when they said she was Black as hell, right? Then I thought, oh, that's Miss Vault. But Miss Vault was white as snow, pretty much, So John, don't make all these things.
Well, the third story, ZZ Packer's story. And one note about that, somebody asked her about the origin of the story, and she said, well, I was a Brownie and a Girl Scout, and I grew up partly in Atlanta where the story is set, but so I was thinking back to childhood, like you, Janice, right now, thinking back to childhood and how girls are and how they treat each other, as well as how the adult world works, racial discrimination, class differences, and bullying. So that's her comment on the story. So let's look at question 3. The final pages of Brownies contain several revelations. What do you think some of them are? What do we learn at the end of this story in the last few pages?
Well, John, I told you of the 3 stories, this is my favorite. It's deceptive, I think. It's so deceptive in being cute. All the girls being cute with one another. It is such a deceptive story of, I don't know, I'll put it overall as of misplaced revenge. And it's, but it's all that's hidden under the cuteness. All that's hidden under the cuteness. Actually, I will tell you, I recommended this story to a new friend of mine in Jacksonville who is African-American, went to Howard University years ago. She's 96 years old, and I'm interested in going back and talking to her about this story because she'll have some interesting perspectives on it. But it's total right from the beginning. These girls are on a summer trip, 1 week long summer trip, and the first thing that Arnetta, that's her name, I think, Arnetta wants to do is beat the crap out of white people. So underlying at the very beginning is that there's racism there, that she's been mistreated and the like, but that's not what the story's about. The story is about revenge, misplaced revenge. It's not about anybody treating her at that time in a bad way. It's about her getting back for what she sees as injustices to her. And there's a story within the story too, at the very end of the Mennonite family too. And that's a misplaced revenge also. It's just all hateful, misplaced revenge. But the story is so cute. But that's the story, is misplaced revenge. That's how I read it. But and I told you before, John, that I found it very deceptive because of the cuteness.
So what did other people learn in the last few pages of the story that we need to know to make sense out of it?
I don't know if it was a lesson or what I learned, but Daphne stuck out to me a lot at the end. Like she stuck out to me because she's the one who was supposedly called names, and then she was the one who wasn't even going to go fight them. And she's like the only innocent, sweet girl. And like that, when she asked that question at the end of like, well, did your dad thank them? And I thought, and like she mentions like how she remembers seeing Daphne bend over when she was cleaning the restroom, and how, she was doing that probably because her mom is cleaning other people's houses, and just like Daphne sees it all. Like Daphne sees it so much better than any of the other girls, and she like feels it, that she has that empathy that like people you either have or you don't have. And I think Daphne, just like, that's what hit me at the end, was just how like strong and powerful that was for Daphne.
And well, let's follow up on that. It's Daphne's really a key character here. What's her relationship with Snot, with the narrator?
They're both quiet girls. Like they're both quiet, and Snot, or I can't remember her name. I just saw it.
Laurel.
Yeah, Laurel. Laurel realizes like 2 quiet girls should just be quiet together. Like they shouldn't talk. There's that point where she like makes it awkward or whatever. And so they're friends, but they're not like, they don't share secrets until the end when Daphne gives her that journal, and they're like, they make that connection.
I thought Snot was about the worst nickname I can think of for a girl. Snot.
And it's
That was
something that happened in second grade, and then she stuck with it for
yeah.
2 years until fourth grade, and maybe
Yeah.
longer than that. But Daphne doesn't call her that. Daphne calls her
true.
Laurel. It's the only way we find out that Laurel is her real name. And it gets very interesting from a mythological point of view here, because Daphne is the Greek word for laurel. Does anybody know the story of Daphne in mythology? Because I think this is pretty relevant here. She was a nymph, a minor goddess, a daughter of a river god who was very devoted to Artemis, Diana, the virgin huntress, and she swore virginity because of that. But Apollo pursued her, and her father, or Zeus in some versions, turned Daphne into a laurel tree to preserve her, save her from the pursuit of Apollo. So there's obviously a connection between these two kids. Their names mean the same thing.
Oh my God.
Literary scholars might call that an alter ego relationship. And by the end, Daphne gives the journal. Remember, Daphne's the poet.
Right.
She's the one who wrote that powerful Father the Veteran crying and how that bothered her so much. But she doesn't write anything in the journal. She hands it to Laurel. What does that mean? What does it mean for Laurel? Laurel's trying to decide what to write in it by the end. She can't think of anything. She doesn't know what to write yet.
Yeah.
Like she's trying to give her a voice, but she doesn't see it, I think, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe what she will eventually voice is this very story.
Right.
This could be the birth of a writer, a writer discovering her voice, her vocation. But it's because of Daphne, this person who is just gentle and kind and cleans up the restroom when nobody else even thinks about doing that. But who couldn't definitively stand up and say, no, nobody called me that name. You know, she's maybe so nice and so quiet. She sees a little more hope in Laurel as the one who can really speak this stuff, stand up more. Because Laurel, you know, she's a victim of peer pressure too in the story, but she does manage to, she carves out more space for herself than Daphne does, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, I thought so too. Was anybody surprised at the end when they confronted the girls in the bathroom that the girls were, quote, how do they describe them? Delayed learners? I mean, because all along you're thinking that, you know, these are a group of white girls just like, I mean, girls just like the Black girls. I mean, there was no hint of anything that was unusual or different with them until, you know, we're waiting outside the bathroom, you know, the restroom, waiting for them to give the sign so they can come in and beat them up. And they weren't, and something was going on that they weren't, you know, should we go in? Should we wait? And so I knew something was going on, and it was, you know, not until, you know, you go in with them do you realize, uh-oh, this is not what I thought it was, right? You know, there's not going to be a fight here. And so why, I was curious as to why the leader, who in some ways, remember the girl who said, "I want my independence. I enjoy being a tattletale," or to the Arnetta and what's her name, Octavia and Janice.
Octavia.
Yeah, but why do you think they didn't fight? Is the question.
Well, I believe there's two reasons, and there's a little hint given before they go in.
Mm-hmm.
I think Snot was the one that says they didn't consider that there might be some girl in there that's bigger than Arnetta. And so the mentally disabled child that is trying to protect all of her friends is a big girl.
Mm-hmm.
So the first thing is like Arnetta is confronted with, oh, I might get the crap beat out of me. And then when the mentally disabled girls are shown, Arnetta is sort of like, my whole story collapses too. But I think the first thing was because there is a reference that they never considered there might be somebody bigger than Arnetta in there. I think the first point is this physical. Arnetta is, Arnetta on the bus trip on the way out just throws off the whole thing like, oh, well, doesn't matter. She's the one in the very first paragraph says, I'm here to kick ass.
Right.
And the very last bus trip is like, oh, well, it wasn't as much of a vacation as I had hoped for. I didn't get to kick ass, but it was okay.
And Arnett quick to, when she accused one of the little girls of using the N-word and it was pointed out that the little girl didn't speak, then she immediately just said, oh, it wasn't that one, it was the other one. And so Dan, to some degree, when you said the misplaced revenge thing, it was like, well, somebody has to pay, right?
Right.
Yeah. And it doesn't, we'll just keep this going. And it was very clear that the second girl that she accused, was, I think the writer says she would sleep with some kind of bear or something like that. I mean, she would play with a bear. I mean, she was just it was so different from what she would do or say. Amy?
So I think this story is causing me a little PTSD, having been a brownie and a 9-year-old girl. So Dan, I'm so sorry, but they're not cute. 9-year-old girls are not cute. There's nothing cute about 4th grade. Oh, they're horrible. So as I was reading the story, I'm like, that resonates, that rings true. And I think I'm about roughly the same age as the author. So those, I was having some serious PTSD because you go to like those brownie and Girl Scout convocations where the troops, at least assuming she's the same generation I am, which I think is true, they're very segregated because it's either based on your neighborhood or based on your school. And at least in the 80s, they would have been very divided, more so than now, I think, maybe not. So kids would not have had any proximity to each other, and everybody's different, so everybody's an other. And so I kind of read it as like a lot of sort of oppressing the oppressed more. So it's like you've got our group of girls attacking Troop 909 who have disabilities, but not knowing that because it's not necessarily visible. It's not a visible others, but it's still there. And then you also have the whole conversation about the Mennonites and would they really do what we, if we ask them to do it, would they really do it? Those are their religious rules. And Daphne getting the last word saying, yeah, I think they would do it, but only to be nice. I don't think it's insignificant that Daphne gets the last word. I'm not sure what the significance is, but it's not insignificant that she closes the story. But yeah, so Dan, nope, don't let their cuteness fool you. They're rotten to the core.
Amy, I have to agree with you. I remember. There were 5 of us. We had our groups and there were other groups and I went to camp a couple of times, but it was just in school and it was nasty and brutal. And I see some of those women now, Dan, they're the sweetest people. And I just can't imagine how they used to call us names and want to fight and put out stories. I mean, it was nasty, as Amy said.
Oh, and don't wear the wrong outfit or the wrong shoes or the wrong friendship bracelet. Oh, no, 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 no.
Dan, I will tell you someday what they used to call me. You know, I was skinny, I had pimples, and I will tell you some of the names I had the girls gave me.
I promise you I'll keep them secret.
Well, they call their own friends snot, so they're not really that nice to begin with, you know?
Well, and I think that's part of that's another way to look at the story. What kind of pulls maybe a lot of what you're saying together, labeling people with a name like snot or retarded, which they call these other girls, who are more diverse than the stereotype of retarded kids. They're all the same. They're all like that. Well, they're not. I mean, they've got a spokesperson in the group who doesn't back down when she's challenged. They've got different kinds of kids, some very quiet. Oh, they're kind of like the other kids, like the black kids. They've got quiet kids. They've got more streetwise kids like Arnetta, who knows very well why they were put in that, why the black kids were put with the developmentally delayed kids, the delayed learners. She knows because we're black, and they sort of shunted all of the less desirable kids together, shunted them off together, so the white kids didn't have to worry about them or be bought by them. So Arnetta's smart about that, and spoiling for a fight most of the time. But these kids, they're more diverse than the stereotypes that fit the groups, whether they're black kids or delayed learners or Caucasian. You know, they have all that joking about Caucasian at the beginning of the story. And that is a pretty ridiculous term. And it's really not used, as far as I know, anywhere other than in the US anymore. The history of it is, I had to look this up because I always thought, why am I a Caucasian? My ancestors weren't from the Caucasus region, but it goes back to early white supremacist ideas that Noah's Ark beached in the Caucasus or hit the mountains in the Caucasus, and that's where all civilization starts. And it's all white people coming from there. Well, obviously, we know better than that now. We know that civilization really starts in Africa, but that was not something that white people even considered back in those days. So we're stuck with this label Caucasian that doesn't really make much sense either. And I think these two Brownie troops are actually a lot more alike than they realized. Quiet kids, the kind of more hostile kids, they're there. It's a range of personalities in both groups. But I think by the end, it's Laurel who's going to tell the tale, who can tell the story, because she can sort of take it all in and accept the journal that maybe this is her journal. This is what she eventually writes in it. I think it's a great story, and it is deceptively simple. But there's the intersectionality, all the different ways you can be prejudiced or have things working against you. What if you were a delayed learner who was black? We don't see that in the story, but it's there. I mean, the possibilities obviously out there. There are black kids who deal with that disability. A lot of wonderful details, like these kids go to Woodrow Wilson Elementary. And in recent years, we've learned a lot about Woodrow Wilson and what a racist he was, which was sad to me to learn, because he was a president I used to like when I was a lot younger. I thought, the League of Nations, he's kind of a cool guy. He wasn't a cool guy at all, but at least on racial matters. So there's just a ton of stuff packed in here that's wonderful to unpack when you start working on it. The mythological, the dimension, the whole thing. So
All right,
Chris is
John,
going to
so
tell
it's
me that we're running out of
It's
time here.
8:15. Do we want to talk about the last question just a little bit? Or have we already kind of covered how they're
Similarity?
different decades, but what are the similarities or differences?
Dan spoke a little bit about that at the beginning, but I certainly would be interested in hearing what some of you have to say.
Do they strike you as similar in more important ways or different in more important ways?
I don't know that it's true as much, but what I would think of as a difference is kind of the amount of power they have over their own lives and over kind of their situation. Because in the first one, with One Christmas Eve, like, she has no power at all. The only power she really has over her son is probably just because she's a single mom. I think if there was a dad in the picture, that would change. And then you get into the lesson, and there's, you know, Miss Moore is able to take them to places like FAO Short. So they're able to go in to places. And so there's a little bit more, not power necessarily, but they at least are able, like the idea of equality, like, oh yeah, you can all go to the same store as there. And then in ZZ Packer, the girls are gonna stand up for themselves, and they're going to like be able to act on this inequality, even though obviously, you know, it's more of like, well, you're just because you're black and they're white, that doesn't actually mean that you're like, there's still a lot of inequality in all of those aspects, I think. But maybe it's still helplessness, and it's still like oppression and inequality, but it's different levels of how much power and how much can they actually do about that inequality.
I like that. Good analysis. Anything else? Other similarities or differences? Amy?
Well, I'm not sure I can top Kara, and I don't necessarily want to try, but I do find it, in a strange way, hopeful that they're the voices of children. And it seems like in each story, it's, I mean, we're not there yet. We're so far not there yet. But each one concludes with an awareness that that young person has, that we don't get to see their future, but they're going to carry what they've learned with them into the future. And like I said, I don't think it's insignificant that Daphne gets the last word in the Brownies. I think we have Sylvie, you know, like I said before, sort of feeling motivated to make changes long-term for herself. And for the record, I absolutely adore Langston Hughes, even though he makes me think in ways that I never thought of before every time. Each story seems to kind of have that, a similar approach, at least as I see it, that this young person has learned something through the course of this discrimination, and or in the case of the Brownies, the negative behaviors that they had towards someone else. And it's hopefully a step, however incrementally small, toward perhaps a better vision of who we can be. At least that's how I see the three together.
Anybody else? Well, how about any closing comments, Janice, that you would like to make?
Really, I really did enjoy all three stories. And every time I would go back and reread or look at something, there seemed to be more things that I had overlooked. And John, so I understood for the first time how when I would hear teachers or professors, you know, covering the same thing, and every time they would learn something, and I couldn't figure out, I said, well, they've already read it, you know, what is there new? I discovered that, and I really appreciated that aspect of it. And little things like the second time I looked at Brownies, and she talked about even the how white people, the color of vanilla ice cream and strawberry ice cream, you know, something like that. And I thought, yeah, that's true. I'd never thought of it that way. And I was telling John that you know, I told you about the lady, Miss Vaught, that was very, very, very fair, but she wasn't white, and her, you know, her, and I used to remember, I always get the color wrong because I lived in a Black community, and when I would see whites, I thought, oh, they're not white, but they're, and then I said, oh yeah, they're pink, and then I said, oh no, they're not pink, you know, but, and when she said the two, I said, it's perfect. That is how I can remember now, or if I needed to describe the color, that's what it would look like. Because Black people, you know, we had colors for, you know, for the very dark all the way to the very light. You know, we had yellow and high yellow and you know, bone. I mean, we had all these terms to describe our, you know, where a Black person was on the color chain, right? And I couldn't get the white part until I read this, and so that was pretty interesting. I know I'm rambling. I just want to say I appreciate the opportunity to join you, John, as a co-facilitator of this discussion, and I always enjoy listening to how people read or see things and interpret them from their experiences and perspective. So I truly enjoyed listening to all of you this evening.
Well, thank you, Janice, and thank all of you for bringing your own experiences into this discussion. I think that was one of our goals, I think, when we started this series several years ago, to create a space where people could connect with literature and draw blend their experiences with texts and talk about issues that sometimes are hard for us to talk about. Speaking of talking, here's a little quick commercial for next year. Maybe this is why I was hitting Laurel finding her voice in the story so strongly, because next year series starting in February is called The Power of Voice. And it will look at moments in American and in one case world history and literature where eloquent voices arose, often from the margins, to address social issues. And we'll look at the power that those voices had. How did they change minds? How did they move hearts? Much as Harriet Beecher Stowe did way back in the 19th century. And in fact, we'll start in the 19th century with some pages from one of Stowe's stories and some other, a little bit of Ralph Waldo Emerson and Walt Whitman in there. So thank you all. It's been a great year talking about these topics, and I look forward to another one in 2022.
All right. Well, as always, thank you for the great discussion tonight. And check our website over the course of the next few weeks to see all of the information about 2022 programming. And don't forget, we are open in December and January for tours by appointment. So if you have out-of-town guests, or if you want to bring your family over the holidays, you know, make an appointment and you can still do that. So, all right, I'm going to sign off, but thank you all very much for attending tonight.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.